Hello everyone, welcome to the Jacksonville History Show. I'm Harry Reagan. Tonight we review the Historical Society's Most Endangered list, and we'll talk about some success stories, buildings that are off the list now. Our guests are Robin Robinson, President of the Historical Society, and Edward Booth, a member of the board. Welcome, both of you.
Hello,
Thank
Harry.
you.
So let's talk about first the current list on our endangered list, and Robin will also talk about what the Historical Society tries to do about saving these.
Right, right.
I mean, there's a limit to what we can do, but we do our best.
Right, we sure do.
Let's go to the list.
Harry, once a year we try to revisit this list and update it. The master reference text, if you will, for all of this is Wayne Wood's book on Jacksonville's architectural heritage, still available for purchase at the Jacksonville Historical Society, but it contains interesting histories on most of these buildings. But I'd like to turn to our 2014 update, and Annie Lydell School, a building familiar to most people in Jacksonville, if not on the eastern seaboard. Because
by the way, I'm sorry to interrupt, but these are not in any particular order.
No,
Okay.
these are just listed as we processed them. So, but we'll start with Annie Lydell because it's an instantly recognizable structure. It's everyone's favorite haunted mansion at the intersection of Interstate 10 and Interstate 95. It has clearly seen better days, and the highway infrastructure has certainly doomed it. Many attempts have been made to come up with an adaptive reuse of this building.
It was already a challenge, but with expressway expansions, becomes even more of it.
But there are a lot of people still attached to this building, and we wish that a solution could be found. The next building familiar to many is Fire Station number 5. It sits on Riverside Avenue in the shadow of the Fidelity Complex. A working fire station for over 100 years. It sits vacant with an uncertain future. It is not scheduled for demolition to our knowledge, but certainly could be torn down on very short notice, as the various options that the city had to exercise have long since passed.
Could it be moved?
It certainly could.
And moving a historic building is always an issue, whether that invalidates its historical significance. What do you think?
I agree with that, but anything that saves it ultimately may be something worth considering.
If it's necessary to move it, to save it.
As opposed to tearing it down. But the next item is not a building, it's a boat. The St. Johns River Ferry, as recent events have taught us, is an important part of our heritage. It has recently secured better funding, so its future for the next year or two seems secure.
And since this list is always a work in progress, the Historical Society Board, Robin, I guess, could take this off the list with and keep an eye on it for the future.
Right. Properties do rotate off the list once we feel like they're secure or not in danger of demolition.
Okay, that's the...
And our next building is the Greyhound Bus Station.
Right.
Sits in the shadow of what was originally the Southern Bell Tower, now the Everbank Tower. It is classic Art Deco design. One of the cooler neon signs, if you look at coffee table books around the country of Art Deco, you'll find this sign in a lot of them. It was in danger of demolition because of a proposal to put a transportation hub with the Prime Osborne Convention Center. That seems to have fallen through, so its future as a working bus station seems secure for the foreseeable future. So this is one we may take off the list.
Okay.
We don't have many residences on the list, but this is a noteworthy one in the Springfield area. Dr. Horace Drew built this home well over 100 years ago. It is capable of restoration if the right person would come along. And we would use this as our current example of residences that would be worthy of preservation. As I said, it's not all buildings. We have a train. This is Atlantic Coastline engine that sits in the parking lot of the Prime Osborne Convention Center. It has been designated a National Engineering Historic Landmark. It was one of the first of a set of standardized engines that were built during World War I to haul troops and materials for the war effort. Later saw passenger use up and down the eastern seaboard from Jacksonville to Richmond, Virginia. So it does have a local connection.
So the problem with it is it needs to be indoors, is that right? It can't sit outside any longer?
Ideally, it needs to be indoors, and it hasn't had a coat of paint in around 20 years. It's the property of the city of Jacksonville, as evidenced by an acceptance plaque on the side. And we hope the city will do the right thing and preserve this landmark for future generations.
And you've got boats and train, no airplane on the list.
We're working on that here. Okay. This is an example of the type of deterioration on this engine. The corrosion has reached a point where something needs to be done. Known as the Jaguar Building, it sits at Ocean and Bay Street, properly known as the Guarantee Trust Building. It has been the subject of numerous newspaper articles about its either impending demolition or resurrection by any number of firms. Its future is uncertain, and its ability to be restored due to its deterioration somewhat in question, in my opinion.
Because it's always a question of, sure, almost anything can be saved, but is it cost effective?
The roof on this building has failed, and when it rains, the inside fills up with water.
Yeah.
The old Duval County Armory is a recent addition to our list. This 100-year-old building sits on the other side of State and Union, around where Liberty Street intersects. Was a working armory and later a concert hall.
Yeah.
And
famous concerts took place there.
Spanned musicians that ranged from John Philip Sousa to my favorite, Janis Joplin.
That's
in
quite
1970.
a span. Sousa to Joplin.
So it has water intrusion problems in the basement. Recent proposal to take it over fell through, and its future is uncertain, and that's why it's on our watch list. The Seminole Club. This is a work in progress. We have read recently where a candy company is going to relocate their headquarters. This goes back, again, over 100 years with the movers and shakers of Jacksonville, held court there for many, many years.
And unlike, let's say, the Jaguar Building, this building is in pretty good shape.
It is. It needs some interior work, but the roof is held, and it's in structurally good shape, and we hope, as with some of these other structures, to take it off our list very soon. The Barnett Bank, at one time Florida's tallest building, dates back to 1926, there was an attempt made about 8 years ago to renovate it, fell through about halfway through the project. A lot of demolition work was done. Some non-conforming windows were put in place. And it is currently the subject of a proposal to turn it into a mixed-use facility, apartments, office space, space for artists. And this was a major feature of the recent One Spark Festival. The public was allowed to go inside and really see how magnificent the two-story interior lobby looks and could look in a restored fashion. So that is another building we'd like to take off the list. Next, we come to what is affectionately called the Laura Street Trio, which consists of the Florida Life Building. It's called Jacksonville's purest skyscraper. The skyscraper movement of the turn of the last century. This was the epitome of that as far as Jacksonville is concerned. The marble bank that everyone recognizes, and probably the one best suited for reuse. And then the Bisbee Building, at the time of its construction, the tallest building in Florida at 12 or 13 stories. It is hoped that these three buildings can be somehow combined with some common utility structures and therefore saved. Again, the issue comes up, is that historic preservation or something else? Because these buildings will not look like they did once this is completed.
And it's a debatable issue whether you achieved historic preservation if you change them significantly.
And
Exactly.
they're owned by the city, is that right? The Lower Street
They
Trio?
are.
Yeah.
And there have been a number of proposals to purchase them. A very interesting building that few people have ever noticed, the Ford Assembly Plant. Dates back to the 1920s when the Ford Motor Company found it expedient to assemble their cars primarily destined for the South American markets in places close to ports of debarkation such as Jacksonville. This building is a handsome red brick structure that is in remarkably good condition. It's in use right now for storage. It's on the waterfront. Were it closer to downtown, closer to Riverside, it would be a perfect location for, say, the Riverside Arts Market.
Or closer to the stadium general area.
Exactly. And that is an aerial view of it showing its proximity to the Matthews Bridge. But unless you know where to look going across the Matthews Bridge, you probably wouldn't notice it. But
Yes.
Model Ts were assembled there during its prime. Up until the early 40s, it was used for car manufacturing, car assembly. And they built hundreds a day during its heyday. A building downtown in the shadow of the new courthouse, Old Stanton High School. Very solid red brick building that was in use for a variety of purposes until about a decade ago. And
Is it used for something now?
I believe it's vacant.
I thought they had a Head Start program or something, but it may
They
just
may
be
use,
vacant.
may use a portion of it,
Yeah.
but it is an example of a very well-built building from our past that could easily be used for a modern function. Next we have Hemming Plaza, the subject of much debate in city council and other venues as to what to do with it. Some recent efforts at re-landscaping it have been successful. It was shown off to great advantage during the recent One Spark Festival. Of particular note is the Confederate Statue, which is one of the older objects in downtown Jacksonville, survived the Great Fire. You know, there are historic photographs showing people fleeing with that statue in the background. So it's not in the best condition if it's to survive for generations to come. It does need some work, and what Hemming Plaza is going to be and what it's going to be used for remains the subject of debate.
Indeed.
Hogan's Creek is a waterway that exits into the St. John's near the Maxwell House Coffee Factory, but travels way up into Springfield. And during the 20s, Clutho designed a series of balustrades, ornamental work that was quite handsome in its day, has fallen into disrepair, and is worthy of being restored as the downtown area gains some restoration. This is an example near Confederate Park, showing what it looked like, and it could look much better if restored to its original condition. The Snyder Church, which is on the south side of Hemming Plaza, the city of Jacksonville put a new roof on it recently, which has started the restoration process. There were some initiatives during One Spark to turn it into a concert space, recording studio.
And the city owns it.
And the city owns it, and I understand there are campaigns underway to attempt to raise the $1 to $2 million that it's going to take to really preserve it for future generations. But an active congregation until about 30 years ago. The Ambassador Hotel kind of lost behind the old federal courthouse and the new state courthouse is thought by many to be adaptable to condominiums, to apartments. It was a first-rate hotel in its day, fallen into disrepair, but is ripe for renovation and restoration. Next, we're going to talk about success stories.
Okay, but before we do that, we're going to take a break.
Okay.
And we'll come back after this break and talk about some successful preservation efforts in Jacksonville. We'll be right back.